Welcome to another episode of Life and Whiskey. As always, I'm Jordan, and today we're going to look at Whiskey Row. So, Whiskey Row, the birthplace of bourbon, as they say. Main Street, Louisville, Kentucky. Let's see, 18th century recipe, blend of straight bourbon whiskey, honey hole selection, high corn mash bill, aged 4 years. 40% ABV or 80 proof. This is barrel number, and I can't read the handwriting on this. It's like 519. I don't know if we can get this to come out or not. Let me just look at my camera while I'm doing this, see if we can get you to see that. Can we get that in focus? I have no idea what that says. You can figure it out. Good on you, because I definitely can't. So this is a blend of different bourbons. On the back, it says distilled in Kentucky and Indiana, so there's probably MGP in here. Blended and bottled in Kentucky by Whiskey Row Distillery, Crestwood, Kentucky. Has a big lengthy blah 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 on there. Backstory that doesn't really mean much of anything. And this says batch number 001. And we'll get into this. I tapped into it, cracked her open. Probably one of the more disappointing whiskeys I bought. Even though the price is low, it's still overpriced in my opinion. 4 years old. It tasted really young. I just cracked into it last night with my wife. We just gave it a little try. And for a corn whiskey recipe, high corn whiskey, which doesn't really mean much because it has a very similar mash bill to like Evan Williams or something like that. It's 70% corn. Does it even say in here what it is? Yeah. Here's the mash bill. Using around 70% corn, 20% rye, 20% wheat, and 10% malted barley, which is a pretty standard bourbon recipe. Yeah. I don't have. Well, we'll get into it. We'll talk about it. So when I did some research, this says Copperhead Distillery Company, Kentucky Artisan Distillery, and Jefferson's. They're all kind of one conglomerate. So like Jefferson's Reserve, Jefferson's Ocean, all part of the brands that are under this conglomerate company, which is basically all those different distilleries put together. Got this for $26.55. So it's $26.55 when I was up in Billings. Yeah. Well, let's get into it. So, color's kind of a light straw, nothing out of the ordinary. 4 years old, which is a minimum, and it says aged 4 years. It's kind of interesting that they put that on there, considering that that's the requirement for a non-age statement whiskey. So maybe there's some whiskeys in here, but the age statement says that's the youngest something can be. So I don't really quite know. But all that being said, on the nose, ethanol forward with a very light floral cherry in the background. I mean, like the lightest of light, barely discernible. Oh, yeah, ethanol forward for sure. I'm not getting a whole lot out of it. There's a couple of other things in there, like a little graham cracker, little vanilla. Not much of anything on the taste. Even at 80 proof, it is extremely bitey. It tastes a lot like a typical American whiskey, so like Kessler's or something like that, without as many sweet notes as what Kessler's has. So it tastes like it is blended with vodka or a neutral grain spirit or something like that. Let me read this again. Blend of straight bourbon whiskey. So that has to be its own thing, I would think, because and would probably be more like an American whiskey because you could call it just straight bourbon whiskey if everything that's in that bottle is just straight bourbon. Um, no matter where you source it or blend it or whatever, you could just call it straight bourbon. So I'm wondering if a blend of straight bourbon, meaning that's the category that it is, somehow they might have got something of an American style whiskey where it's corn whiskey mixed. Because I mean, this tastes like the not Irish Kessler's, any of those blends where it's not just one thing. It's very bitey, very ethanol. Tastes like, and the ethanol, the bitiness tastes like it is like made from a sugar mash. So if you take sugar and dump it into your mash, it gives this bitey sensation to the alcohol that you don't find when you get other grains, solely grains. And I'm wondering if that's what this is. If this is a blend of something like that. Now I couldn't find any information about that. They're saying that it's just bourbon in here, but it just doesn't taste like it. And if it is, they got a lot of growing up to do. This says straight bourbon on the back. 8th century corn recipe, which all that means nothing. Where bourbon has been distilled and blended since the 18th century. Blah, blah, blah. Whereas most of today's bourbon recipes have a recipe using around blah, blah, blah. The newly arrived cellars and bourbon distillers used only corn. Our Whiskey Row Century straight corn bourbon recipe follows that early tradition. Okay. Maybe I should have read this a little bit more. Okay. So this is not a bourbon. So technically, to be a bourbon, it has to be distilled below 160 proof. It has to be at least 51% corn, and it has to be aged in a new charred oak barrel of some sort or a new oak barrel. There's no length of aging requirement. So I think they're calling this a bourbon. So what I read earlier, that mash bill, is not the mash bill that's in here. Hence, and I should have just read that more. This is probably way more corn. So this is basically a corn whiskey that they are calling a bourbon. And technically, you can do that if so corn whiskey, to fall into a corn whiskey category, has to be at least 51% corn, and it has no aging requirement, and it can go into used barrels or new uncharred oak. And so those parameters, if those aren't followed, it would essentially have the same requirements as bourbon if you did a new charred barrel and still came off the still at 160 proof or less, and had at least 51% corn. So what I'm guessing, okay, take back everything I just said. I'm not going to delete it out just because it's probably worth having this conversation on the camera. So if this is like 80% corn, 20% malt, or 90% corn, 10% malt, something like that, but they follow the parameters of bourbon, that's why this could be considered a bourbon. Now it's starting to make a little more sense in my head. I still think that they sugared this up because it definitely has that bitiness like they did. But I wonder if that's what they're doing, is they just put corn in there and are calling it a bourbon. Highly possible. I don't really know. But, you know, judging from kind of what they're saying here, that's kind of the take I get away from it. And remember, this is a blend. So MGP and another distillery out of Kentucky are the sources of this whiskey, as far as the base blended whiskeys. It definitely doesn't have bourbon characteristics to it, really. And now that I'm thinking about more, it has more of a corn whiskey. Nose has that touch of vanilla graham cracker in there, and that the profile is just really bitey, very ethanol forward, very sharp, very young, even though it's 4 years. Nothing smooth or rounded about it at all. It's very spiky. You get a little bit of vanilla, you get a little bit of grain dust in there, you get a little bit of corn, not a whole lot of anything distinguishable. You get that graham cracker. There is a light fruit in there, but not a whole lot. The spikiness of the ethanol overtake and the dryness of the mouthfeel overtake the profile largely. Not a great whiskey. I would say you could get this for $20, you'd be doing good. $26.55, okay, not terrible, but I would not buy this again, and I would not go out of my way to find it. If you want a corn whiskey, stick with Mellow Corn, Platte Valley Moonshine. I like both of those a lot. There's several others out there you could choose from that I think have been done way better. I just don't know what to say about this. I'm not a fan. I would not pay even $26.55 for it. It's not breaking the bank, but it's not awesome. It needs more age. It needs a more rounded flavor profile. And for being an artisan distillery, I haven't done any of the research on any of this, but I'm thinking this is money trying to make more money. And you know, they got a really nice label. It is very busy. They got a lot of words on here that don't mean a whole lot. They're trying to sell a backstory. And this is batch number 1. Don't get this. That's what I would recommend. Let me know what you can find this Whiskey Row blended straight bourbon for in your area. As I said, $26.55 in Billings, Montana. Let me know if you've had this, what your thoughts are. It's a blender, in my opinion. It's a mixed drinks blender. I would not want to drink this straight up. It's just not very good. As a fan of corn whiskey and moonshine, which is unaged whiskey, I really like that heavy corn silagey type flavor profile, whatever. Not finding that in this glass. Not finding that super sweetness that you get out of a corn whiskey either. So yeah, it's a hard pass for me. So yeah, drop in the comments down below what you think about this. If you've had any experience, what you can find it for in your area. I'd love to hear what you have to say. As always, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe to the channel. Let me know your thoughts. Also check out YouTube, BitchUte, and Minds, Life and Whiskey on all those. Life_and_whiskey on minds.com. Yeah, thanks for watching. You guys have yourselves a great day. We'll catch you in the next video.